experience at home a little more manageable. And my assumption is that you'll be taking classes online, but I will try to weave in various tips and tricks for just taking yourself through a self practice. Um, so I will note, if you are going the self-practice route, I'd highly recommend checking out Yoga Journal's website. They have really comprehensive pages about various poses if you want to understand a pose in greater detail, if you want to understand how to move in or out of a pose. But more importantly, they also offer mini flows. So you could look on their website and find a flow for opening the hips, or like a power flow, a yin flow, a restorative practice. So if you are planning to practice on your own outside of a class online from home, then I would highly recommend you use the resources at the Yoga Journal website. Whether you're practicing in a class or on your own, I think it's a great idea to set your space and to be really intentional with your space. Ideally, you want to find a space that is quiet. It might be nice to have an altar or something that makes the space inviting and maybe even sacred. So perhaps you include plants in your space. You'll see I've got my fireplace. I've got some stuff on my altar up there. You may want to include candles, if you like to diffuse oils, anything just to make. Of course, you're going to want a yoga mat. If you don't have a yoga mat, a towel or a blanket might work. And then I typically recommend having a yoga block or something like that. So here is a yoga block. You can order them off Amazon. Quite similar, though, to a yoga block is a textbook. And you'll see I've got my old tabs in my textbook, but they're similar in size, similar in shape. They're not quite as easy to move around, but we often use the blocks in the practice to bring the floor closer to us. So thinking about, for example, like in triangle or in extended side angle, if you go into that deep side bend and you bring your lower arm down and it doesn't quite touch the floor, having your block or your textbook or something to bring the floor up will be really beneficial. You can still press into whatever your prop is to create an upward force in the body. So again, yoga mat, block, or textbook, or something to bring the floor up to you. You may want to have a strap. If you don't have a yoga strap, a hand towel or a belt can work. Oftentimes you'll do stretches where you'll reach for your foot, and maybe you don't quite reach the foot, but if you wrap the towel or the belt around the foot, then you can get that resistance by pulling on the prop. And then a blanket. So oftentimes you see blankets in yoga studios. There's really nothing that special about your yoga blanket. So just any sort of blanket will work. The one thing you'll want to think about when you use a blanket, whether it's a traditional yoga blanket or just a blanket from your house, is that you fold it evenly so that it's not like lumpy, that you have an even surface with your blanket. And then finally, you'll see in the background, I have a more traditional yoga bolster. But if you don't have a bolster, what you probably have that will work just as nicely is a pillow. So just to review that one more time, you can use a yoga mat or a blanket or a towel. Something that has a bit of a grip is going to be more ideal. A strap or a hand towel or in lieu of the hand towel, you could also use a belt, a block, or a textbook, any kind of blanket, a bolster, or a pillow. Those are all the kinds of props that you might find helpful in your yoga practice. So all of that falls under setting your space. After you've set your space, you'll want to think about preparing yourself for class. Ideally, you'll want to be in comfortable clothes in which you can move easily. I typically recommend avoiding like running pants that have a zipper in the back pocket. You don't really want any hardware down the backside of your apparel. Will often be on our back at one point or another. And those like zippers in the back pocket, if they start to run perpendicular to your body, like you feel them jam into your back, and that's not a lot of fun. Additionally, if possible, you want to try to practice on more of an empty stomach than not. In other words, don't eat a big meal before practice. If you feel like you're going to need some sort of sustenance to give you energy, a light snack is great. But a big meal, you're going to feel that in your forward folds. You're going to feel that in your twists. It may not be the most comfortable, and that could inhibit your movement. So after you've set up your space, after you have prepared yourself for class on a more physical level, then you're going to want to think about the intention of your practice. And this is especially true if you're leading yourself through a self practice. And you can think about your intention along two different lines, and it might be either or it might be both of these kinds of intentions. So one is more of a energetic, mindful intention, like what kind of quality do you want to embody as you practice? You may say, I really want to use this practice to cultivate self-compassion. I really want to use this practice to calm my nervous system. I really want to use this practice to find peace. Again, I think the easiest way to set this first kind of intention is to think about a quality that you'd like to embody for your practice, and then set an intention around that at the beginning of the practice. The second kind of intention is a little bit more like practice oriented and practical. And so here I'm talking about like what is the purpose of the practice on the physical plane from a practical perspective. Are you looking for like a vigorous practice that's going to make you sweat, that's going to really get the muscles flexed? Or are you looking for a super calming practice that's going to bring the nervous system down, that's going to stretch out the body, that's going to focus on quieting the mind? There's a full spectrum of how you can use yoga. The first kind of practice I mentioned, like a stronger power practice, the intention behind that is going to be very different from the intention behind a yin practice or a gentle practice, or even just a meditation practice where you're not moving. So you'll want to come into the practice knowing what it is you're trying to get out of it. If you are trying to calm the nervous system and really stretch the body, you're not going to want to do a ton of, fast flows through standing postures, for example. You're going to want to make your postures closer to the ground. You're going to want to hold things for longer and focus on finding stillness as opposed to a faster flow. I hope that makes sense. And again, this is really more, you're thinking through this at a deeper level if you are going through a self practice, but to a certain extent, you're also thinking about these things when deciding what classes to sign up for. So for example, I teach a yin class at 8:30 through the Department of Campus Recreation, if your intention is to really sweat, build some heat in the body, flex your muscles, then you're probably not going to want to sign up for my 8:30 class on Tuesday nights in furtherance of that intention. Um, I encourage you, when setting your intention for practice, to really check in with yourself, and not just checking in with yourself intellectually, but really feel into the body, check in with your intuition, ask, what is it that I need? And go with what intuitively arises, as opposed to listening to your intellectual voice, which sometimes is really good at telling you what you should do um, from a more rigid perspective, but isn't really good at listening to your body in the moment. To give an example, sometimes like I feel tired, and the should voice is like, well, then you should do something to bring your energy up. And it's like not okay to be tired. But if I really were to listen to my body, what my body would tell me is, you are tired, you need some rest, go with the more gentle practice. So, really tuning in not just to your intellectual mind, but into the body and into the intuition is really important when setting an intention. And again, that's the intention for your practice if you're doing a self practice, or as you're thinking about what classes to take. Okay, so after we have set our space, prepared ourselves for class, set an intention for the kind of practice we want to engage in, then the next step is transitioning into practice. So what I'm going to walk through, hopefully you'll get in a lead class. If you're practicing on your own, these are the kinds of things you'll want to build into the beginning of your practice. And this is really before the warm-up. So first, you'll just want to take a few conscious breaths and begin to turn inward. Using these conscious breaths to transition you from whatever you were doing before to your mat. And really transitioning you into your body. And this is a great time to do a body scan. I like to close my eyes. You can do it in a seated meditation. You can lay on your mat. And when you scan the body, you're not just scanning the physical body. Of course, you want to scan the physical body. Notice if there are places where the breath feels stuck, if there are places in the body that feel tight or tender. But I always encourage my students to go a few layers deeper. So I'll ask them to scan their energetic bodies. Just notice if their energy feels really frenetic or if their energy feels grounded. You may also want to scan your emotional body, just noticing whether there are emotions that seem more prevalent than others. And you can tend to whatever comes up throughout your practice, especially if you are taking yourself through a self practice. So if you notice your energy is really high, then you'll want to take some really conscious breaths to bring that energy down. And I'll talk about the breath more in a moment, but just so you know what that means, if the energy is super frenetic, a longer exhale in your breath than the inhale is going to help bring the energy down and bring some heaviness into the body. If you, as you're scanning, your emotional body, or as you scan your mind, you notice that you are like ruminating with a lot of negative self-talk or shame, then you may want to incorporate some self-compassion meditation into your opening breathing. And again, I'll be talking more about the breath in just a minute. But the main objective as you are transitioning into your practice is really taking inventory of all that you are showing up with on your mat without judgment. It's a curious inquiry. How am I feeling in the physical body? How's my energy? How am I feeling in the emotional body? What's going on in my mind? Is your mind, I like to say at the beginning of class, like a 6-lane highway at rush hour? Is it more like a quiet country road? Something in between? Um, if you notice that the mind is like going at 80 miles an hour, it might be helpful to add a count to your breath. So you're actually counting as you breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, however long you make your inhales, and then counting each count of the exhale. That's going to help focus the mind. So depending on what comes up in your inventory, you can tailor your practice to exactly what you need on any given day. I've alluded to this a lot in the transitioning into practice portion of the checklist, but the next step is really developing the breath. So as you were transitioning into practice, you took a few conscious breaths just to help you drop in and check in. Now is where you're going to start to be more intentional with the breath. So as I mentioned, or as I alluded to, you can manipulate your breath to arrive at a specific state. Some very basic examples. Again, a long, slow breath is going to be more calming, especially where your exhales last a little bit longer than your inhales. If you feel like you're coming into practice, your energy feels low, but you're trying to bring your energy up, then you're going to want a more rapid breath, like a breath of fire. So a more calming breath would be, for example, like your 3-part breath where you breathe into the belly and it's a slow inhale. Then you breathe into the rib cage, the lower ribs, and then you breathe into the upper chest. And then as slowly as you can, you let that breath go. The breath of fire is a much more rapid breath. It's really just a focus on the exhales, and you're pushing those exhales out so quickly that you are automatically inhaling. Again, it's a pretty rapid breath. If you picked up that your mind is all over the place, one breath that I like, the box breath or the square breath, you breathe in for 4 counts, counting the inhales. Then you hold the breath in at the top for 4 counts, counting those 4 counts. You breathe out for 4 counts and then pause, holding the breath outside of the body. You retain the breath for 4 counts. Again, external retention of the breath before you take your next breath in. There are a lot of examples on this, and I'll encourage you to check out I think it's through the Campus Recreation website or Instagram, but definitely check out their Instagram. We're doing a Sunday wind down series, and one of the Sundays that I've already recorded is all about using the breath to arrive at different energetic states. I do alternate nostril breathing. I do the box breath or the square breath. There's just so much on how you can manipulate the breath to create a specific state in the body. And if you're interested in this, you're welcome to come to my Tuesday night Yin classes. Again, in the Yin class, we are holding poses in stillness, but we work with the breath throughout the practice as well. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the list again. You've set your space, you've prepared yourself for class, you've set an intention, you've started transitioning into practice by taking inventory of yourself, then you've developed your breath, you've used the breath to create the desired state of the body for practice. And then it's time to start integrating movement into the body. I will note that the breath that you take as part of your transition into practice may not be the breath that you use to practice. So what I mean here, if you noticed your energy was up here and you want to bring yourself down to a more just like, you don't want to bring yourself all the way down, but you want to bring yourself to a more steady state. Let's say you use that 3-part breath with really long exhales to create a bit of a heaviness in the body. You probably don't want to keep working to create more heaviness in the body as you start to move. So depending on how much movement, how intense the movement is, you might transition the breath for the practice itself. So most of the time, most movement yoga practices use the ujjayi breath or the ocean breath. And I really like to think about that breath. There's a bit of a constriction in the roof of the mouth and the back of the throat, but you're fully inflating the lungs. So you're bringing the breath down to the lower ribs in the front of the body, the lower ribs in the back of the body, the upper chest, and the upper back body. So it's like a full inflation of the lungs. And we're not just thinking about inflating the lungs top to bottom, but also the width of the body is expanding as well as the body front to back. So that's a much more even breath. And you're not thinking about bringing it all the way down into the belly. You're not thinking about these really long exhales. The practical reason for wanting to transition from like a 3-part belly breath into a slightly more shallow breath in a power class, especially, or a class with a lot of movement, is because if you're breathing all the way down into the belly, it's harder to take forward folds. Like that deep belly breath is not super conducive to movement. So you might shift the breath as you start to integrate into movement. So integrating movement into the body is the 6th step of your practice. If you are taking a lead class, the instructor should lead you through this. But if you are doing your own self practice, you're not just going to want to like jump right into a super powerful yoga flow. You're likely going to want to come into a tabletop position. So just to show you, if you don't know what I mean by tabletop, you'll have your shoulders over your wrists, your hips are over your knees. And then from this shape, you can start to move the spine in all 6 directions that the spine moves. So you're able to extend the spine, opening through the front of the body, flexing the spine, opening through the back of the body. You can laterally move the spine in both directions. And you can even take spinal rotation by threading the needle here. So you don't have to move from your tabletop position, but that's probably the easiest and most common way that you'll see your body's ability to move through all 6 directions. So again, just to review that, and you can do this seated too, you'll think about inhaling and opening up through the front, lifting the heart, slightly arching the low back, and then exhaling to flex the spine, drawing the belly in, creating space in the back body. And you have your lateral movement of the spine, and you can rotate the spine again, seated. You'll definitely want to warm up the spine. Other places that are probably nice to warm up: your wrists, your ankles, your shoulders. You can do super simple things like rolling out the wrists, rolling the ankles, shoulder rolls. It's always good to warm up your core. So again, from tabletop, a super simple way to warm up the core is through a bird dog, So in tabletop, opposite arm, opposite leg will extend, belly will pull in. Just holding here is core activation. You can deepen that core activation by drawing the elbow to the knee, really pulling the belly up to round the spine. I'll show you another really nice therapeutic move to help warm up the hips. So you'll come, basically if you come from a cross-legged position, shift your weight to one side, take the other leg behind you. In Yin Yoga, we call this shape deer pose. You'll place your hand on the thigh of the leg that's bent back. And as you inhale, you'll wrap that thigh forward, internally rotating the thigh. You can let the hip lift. And then as you exhale, wrap that thigh back, let the hip come down. So this is a nice, easy way to start working into the hips. This also is great for your SI joint. Don't want to do that. Another great option. And sorry, the camera is a little bit different on WebEx than Zoom, so I don't have the most ideal setup. But another nice option for warming up the hips from your back, if you take the feet wide, you can windshield wiper the legs side to side. The leg that comes into the middle, that's internally rotating, whereas the leg that opens out to the side is externally rotating. So just lots of different gentle moves you can make to start to warm up the body. Like I said, you never want to go right in to a really intense flow or to a really intense yoga pose. If you're taking a gentle class, if you're self-practicing and keeping it gentle, the whole practice can look like that. If you are thinking about progressing to something more intense, I would encourage you, if you're newer to the practice, take the lead classes, follow an instructor who knows how to construct a safe and intelligent sequence. But if you have a good foundation of knowledge and you're thinking about putting together your own sequence, I'll offer you a couple tips. So one, you sort of want to think about your end game for the practice. And what I mean by end game is, what are the most intense poses? What are the poses that require the body to be the most open? And you'll want to make sure before you get there, you do some poses that look like it, that are not quite as intense or that don't require the body to be quite so open first. So like, what do I mean by that? One example, eagle arms. Folks find coming into this eagle arm shape to be pretty intense. Your rhomboids have to be really open. So you could take a shoulder stretch. You could thread the needle in tabletop. You will want to do something like that before dropping right into your most intense, demanding posture with eagle arms. Another example is with pigeon. Unless it's a yin class, and yin is sort of its own different flavor that I'm not going to go too deeply into any style of yoga here. But if you are sort of putting together some sort of flow, you're not going to want to just drop right into pigeon. That is going to feel super intense. Instead, so let's deconstruct pigeon for a second. So pigeon is a posture where you're externally rotating one thigh, your front leg. You're bringing that shin more or less parallel to the top of the mat while the other leg extends all the way back. And then you take yourself all the way down. So it's a really intense hip stretch, pretty intense external rotation of that front hip. So what looks like that could help prep you for that shape? Well, figure 4, right? You want to sort of look at the common shapes here. So you can do figure 4 just seated. You can do figure 4 on your back. And maybe on your back, you're really pressing your elbow into the bent knee and pushing that leg away from you. Yeah. So the point here, as you think about like building out a sequence, if you're practicing on your own, is you want to look at the end game of your practice. What are some of the poses you want to bring yourself into? Are there shapes that look like a slightly less intense version of that shape that you can take first to start to prepare the body? A couple other quick tips, and these are more about self-practicing, but knowing this information might be nice even if you take a lead class, because you can sort of be critical of the classes you take. And if you notice, based on what I'm about to say, if something felt missing from that class, then you know what you can like sprinkle in on your own after. So 2 things. You want to think about opposing actions, usually opposing joint actions, and just the general theme of interweaving of opposites. So the yoga practice, the physical, the mental, it's all about interweaving opposites, cultivating the opposite. We could do a whole class on that aspect of yoga theory. But from like a more practical perspective, if you've just done a big back bend, like a bridge or a wheel, you'll always want to follow that up with a forward fold. If you've done a lot of standing postures with your front knee bent, think lunges, warriors, you want to make sure you have an even amount of standing straight leg postures where the muscles in the back of the leg get stretched out. They were working really hard in the bent leg postures, and then in the straight leg postures, that's where they're being stretched. So if you are putting together your own practice, or if you have just taken a class and there have been like a ton of standing bent leg postures and really nothing to stretch the backs of the legs, or a ton of back bends and nothing to stretch the back of the body, you're going to want to make sure you balance out those postures with the postures that do the opposite. Hopefully all the classes that you are taking, especially at through Campus Rec, fully incorporate that principle, but especially if you're putting the practice together on your own, make sure you're always thinking about, okay, what were the actions of this pose? What were these shapes? What's the opposite of these shapes? How do I interweave them together? And then, most yoga practices, there will be some kind of dynamic warm up, Surya Namaskar A and B, followed by a standing series. That's where you're going to do your warriors, your triangle poses, forward folds, like standing forward folds. You're likely to have a balancing posture at the end of your standing series. And then you start to transition your way down to the floor. And then on your mat, where you're lower to the ground, that's where you're going to hold some of your deeper stretches for a little bit longer. So, like, for example, that's where your pigeon would come in. That's where, some of the really deep hamstring stretches come in. And then after you've done your standing poses, your seated series, then you maybe start to move into inversions or back bends or some combination of the two. And then you start to bring yourself down. maybe taking a few final, more gentle stretches before coming into a closing meditation. And then finally, the most important part of the practice where everything comes together, your final relaxation, Shavasana. I encourage you, especially if you're home practicing, not to cut out that rest. If you're practicing online, when everyone goes into rest, I encourage you not to just drop out of the class and go on with your day. That rest is what can make your yoga practice as rejuvenating as it can be. It's what like brings the multivitamin of a yoga class together. You just like balanced out, you interwove all these physical opposites. You cleared the mind with meditation, or you calmed the mind with meditation. Give your body the opportunity for that rest too. My favorite thing about like being home, being online, taking classes online is that you can stay in Shavasana as long as you like, especially with like a later evening class, like the Yin class that I teach Tuesday nights. Like you can literally just like melt yourself over to your bed after. So take advantage of that. I know for years I would take and teach later Yin classes. And what I would say when I was the student, what other students would say when I was the teacher is, I wish I could just like be in my bed right now. And right now you actually get to just like be in your bed after a few steps. So take advantage of that. Okay, I have just a couple other super brief tips about music. And then instead of doing much in the way of a physical practice, we'll close out with a meditation. And if you have any questions, I will give you a few minutes to ask those. So if you're self-practicing and you're making a playlist, just super easy guidelines to help guide the playlist. Those early songs, like the first 3 to 5 minutes, think about songs that you like, music you would want to wake up to, like really gentle, not jarring, nice and easy. That's when you're scanning the body. That's when you're working with your breath. Maybe taking the intensity up just a tiny bit as you start to move into your integration. Songs that feel like morning, songs that energize you, but in a way that's not jarring, and in a way that's like gentle and sweet. And then you, based on the intention you set for your practice, like if you want like a strong sweaty practice, then maybe you put in some like songs that make you want to dance. If your intention is a more gentle class, then you're probably not going to want to take it up too much from the kind of music you used for your integration of movement. And then finally, the songs that you put at the end of your playlist, really for the final meditation and the final resting pose, think about songs that you'd want to go to sleep to. Super easy guidelines, but I find that helps to create like a really nice arc if you're creating a playlist. So that is all the information that I have to offer about practicing at home, including self-practice. So without any further ado, maybe you incorporate some of what we talked about. Maybe you grab a hold of a blanket, or if you'd like to sit on a block or a book, something to just help elevate the hips so that the knees can come down a little bit lower than the hips for our closing meditation. I'll invite you to roll the shoulders back a couple times and then place the palms on the knees. Palms face down might feel more grounding. Palms face up will help to open the chest Maybe will help you to feel better positioned to receive. Allow the chin to gently drop towards the chest as the eyes fall shut. And then let's just start to turn inward. Starting to feel into the body, feeling the way the breath expands the body, feeling the way the breath softens the body, the way the body softens as you let go of the breath. Just let yourself breathe naturally without controlling or manipulating the breath to start. Feeling the way the breath changes the body. And I invite you to take your scan through the physical body. Are there places where the breath feels restricted? So, can you take a full breath into the bottom of the rib cage, into the belly, or does the breath feel like it gets stuck at the top of the chest? Widening your awareness into the body. Are there places in the body that feel tight or tender? Are there places that feel achy? Are there places that feel soft and supple, open? There are places that just feel sweet and good. Equal opportunity body scanning here. Noticing the good, noticing that which doesn't feel good without any judgment. Maybe bringing your awareness into the energetic body. Your energy feel calm, feel heavy, feel frenetic. No judgment, just observation. And then finally, I invite you to check in with the mind, noticing without trying to control. You think about the mind like a blue sky on a summer day, and the thoughts are like the clouds. They just roll in, you notice them without attaching a story or any judgment to them. You just let them go as easily as they've come. As you watch those thoughts, just notice, are there lots of thoughts? Are they moving quickly? Or is the mind more like that quiet country road? And I'll invite you to become a little bit more intentional with the breath here. We'll breathe in through the nose for a count of 4, and I'll count us out in a second. We're going to hold the breath in for a count of 4, and then exhale the breath out through the nose or mouth for a count of 4 before we pause at the bottom of the exhale for a count of 4. When you're ready, breathe out, let go of the breath. And then we'll inhale through the nose. 2, 3, 4. Holding the breath at the top of the inhale for 2, 3, 4. Gently let that breath go through the nose or mouth. 3, 4. Pause. Let yourself be easy as you are empty of breath here. 3, 4. Inhale, easy, gentle, filling up with breath, not forced. 3, 4. Holding the breath. 2, 3, 4. Easy exhale. exhale, let the shoulders and jaw soften as that breath releases, pausing at the bottom of the exhale for 2, 3, 4. We'll do this twice more. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Pause and hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale it out. 2, 3, 4. Pause. Hold the breath outside of the body. 3, 4. Last cycle of breath here. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold it in. 2, 3, 4. Exhale it out. 2, 3, 4. Pause and hold. 2, 3, and 4. Resume your natural breath. Feel into the body here. Let everything be soft. Let the breath be easy. This place of stillness, maybe you set an intention for the rest of your evening. It could be as simple as just identifying a quality that you'd like to embody. Notice what comes up for you. And drop the chin a little closer to the chest. Gently blink the eyes open and come on up. So we have just a couple more minutes. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to unmute yourselves and ask your questions. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. We're going to be doing this again in October, and I invite you to join in October. We'll spend a little bit more time moving and implementing some of what we laid out today. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to share them. And if not, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and you're always welcome through GW Campus Recreation to take my Yin Yoga class. It's a practice of long held stretches with an emphasis on, holding postures and stillness to target the deep connective tissue of the body. So I would love to have you Tuesday nights, 8:30 to 9:30. If nobody has any questions, I will give you all just a few minutes back to your evening. I hope you have a great evening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you. Thanks, Bruna. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Mallory. Sorry for all those technical issues.
No, I'm sorry on my end. We should have checked beforehand. It's fine.
I tried to check, but again, I was like, oh, I'm at a page where
yeah,
I can't do anything because it's not the right time. But hopefully that was helpful to folks.
Yeah. I record. Oh, let me stop recording.